Hello, blessings. This is High Priestess Jamila. I wanted to come by and talk about exorcisms. And what we're going to talk about in this video is the exorcism of Emily Rose. Okay, that's not her real name, but this is Anneliese Michel. Okay. I wanted to come and talk about exorcism and how, in a lot of ways, not every single time, but I feel like in a lot of ways, the church fails a lot of people when it comes to exorcising of demons. Okay. Now, first of all, nobody is actually necessarily possessed by a demon, in my humble opinion. There are some people that will be definitely in disagreement of that, okay? But it would depend on what the spirit is. I personally, for one, knowing what I know about demons or daemons, I would rather be possessed by a demon than to be possessed by a spirit or either another person or some kind of church organization. Okay. And that is based upon my knowledge. What I wanted to cover in this video is that this is Anneliese Michel, or Anneliese Michel, before the exorcism. 67 of them, actually. That's her on the left. On the right is afterwards. Okay, obviously she lost her life due to these 67 exorcisms. And so what I wanted to get into, first of all, is how she didn't really need an exorcism. And if she needed an exorcism, obviously it was done wrong. I am a witch that has been doing spiritual work for people for almost 11 years. I will be celebrating my 11th year anniversary this December, okay? And what I can tell you is that the exorcisms that I have seen that have been performed by priests of the church, either Catholic priests, I don't think I've ever seen any Christian priest do an exorcism, but I can tell you that they are pretty subpar in the way that it is performed. This is not in any way a jab at people that believe in Jesus Christ. But from what I can see, they're subpar. First of all, witches have been chasing away bad spirits. Women have been chasing away bad spirits for probably billions of years. Okay. And so supposedly there are some scary recordings of Anneliese. I didn't listen to it personally because what is very strange about all of these exorcisms is that they all seem to mirror the movie The Exorcist. And possession can look very different on different people, okay? So pretty much possession is not always happening from a daemon. There are so many women, children, men that are under possession by people. I would say there is a high number of cases of people being possessed by people. Of course, there are other situations that, like, for example, I have spoken about as far as like with social media, the empty seaters, but obviously that would be a totally different type of situation with where I have a theory that a lot of the gang stalkers and a lot of the people doing weird things in social media, I feel that they are possessed by entities that are communicating with us through the internet somehow, okay? And I feel like the reason why those people are highly susceptible to possession and mind control is because there may be some trauma, abuse, but then again, also, I feel like a lot of those people lack a soul, okay, in their body. So if you lack a soul, then that means that you lack a purpose, and that means that you really lack consciousness, period. Now, what I wanted to get into first of all is the need for an exorcism, okay? I feel that what was going on with Anneliese Michel is the same thing that is going on with a lot of people, which is a collective consciousness and psychic energy. Fear is what I believe ultimately was possessing her. Coincidentally, what we see a lot is a perfectly healthy human being that ends up being completely obliterated by people around them. What I mean by that is people's need to project their negativity into a person. What I have seen a lot of is, especially within the church, I have seen a lot of it. Pretty much people putting or projecting. A lot of parents do that. There's a lot of parents that do that. They just project all of their negativity, their fears, their self-hatred into their children, whether or not they are saying it verbally or they are thinking it. Now, keep in mind, one of the things that a lot of people forget about is not just powers of the tongue, but the powers of unclean minds. So unclean thoughts. This is something that seems to have been forgotten about, is negative thinking. You don't have to say things. Being a psychic, being a medium, being someone that can read minds, being someone that possesses powers and gifts of telepathy as well as telekinesis, I can promise you that negative thoughts widely is what was put into Anneliese Michel due to her parents being highly religious. This is the result of it, especially since the whole possession of Reagan in the movie The Exorcist. Possession always looks like somebody in a growly voice, and this is exactly what people are manifesting. This was manifested into her. Now, I am not trying to attack her parents, but there are a lot of people that are religious that have fears, and they are definitely able to manifest within themselves or other people the fears that they have. We don't really know the whole story of what the background was with the parents. I will look for that information, but I felt compelled to make this video because I believe that that is ultimately what contributed to Anneliese's demise. I don't believe that it was any kind of possession by anything except for perhaps maybe fear, but then also religious and spiritual psychosis is what I believe ultimately killed her. Okay. From what they stated was that she was starved to death, which is very common. It's very common. It's also very common for people that are heavily into the church to fast. For some reason, they believe that if they don't eat anything, that that's going to clean out the demon. Well, I don't agree with that. As a pagan, I don't agree with that. But, that's just what some people believe. They believe that you can starve the entity that actually is not there in most cases. Another thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to possession is the lack of naturally formed elements and compounds of the earth that are usually missing from the exorcisms, okay? More than likely at some point, Anneliese probably did end up being possessed by spirits, because if you're in a fasting state, it is easier for you to become possessed. That is a fact. Or either to fall under a spiritual psychosis. So usually when I'm looking at these movies, and we've seen plenty of them, and a lot of the priests and preachers, not saying all of them because I've seen some of them, when they go and clean a house, I've seen footage of them actually taking sage with them to cleanse and pray prayers in the Bible. I've only seen that once. However, there are certain things that they are missing, though, like water, fire, not to burn the person alive, but just to invoke the spirit of nurturing. That is the reason why we use fire, because fire nurtures, fire feeds, fire brings about transformation, and then it also opens up certain doorways that you're trying to open up. Also, salt. You never see salt present at these exorcisms, not even table salt. Salt water would be very helpful, or water and salt. You can mix it together or not. Certain herbs would be good for driving out negative spirits. I think the one thing that a lot of people are lacking, though, which is most important, is love. When they're doing these exorcisms, they are showing hatred for this supposed demon named Satan. That's not going to do it. A person that is possessed on some levels have sort of accepted that fate, at least during that time. You're yelling and screaming at this person named Satan, and all you're doing is showing hate. You're not actually showing love. Now, as a mother, and knowing many, many mothers, and then even some mothers that are witches, and witches love their children very much, okay? A mother's love is very powerful. This is something that was actually shown in the movie called The Exorcist. I believe that it was Reagan's mother in The Exorcist that ultimately saved her, besides a demon that had been protecting her for a very long time, named Pazuzu. Okay? So, love, earth, air, fire, water. Love is what's needed. The spirit of love is what's needed. Okay? It's a shame that Anneliese ended up like this, and it is because the input of the divine feminine, which is the witch, is rarely brought into play in the situation. Sadly enough, there are a lot of witches that are afraid of taking on this. Not all, but there are a lot of them that would be very intimidated by doing an exorcism on a person. I personally have done many of them, but I can tell you that none of the exorcisms that I have done has harmed myself or the people that I've done them on. I can tell you that the worst possession that I have been under is the possession of malignant people. Malignant people who have a need to avoid accountability for their mistakes. Knowing I am an empath and projecting that in to me, or at least attempting to, conjuring certain spirits now. And so this was actually something that was just recently taught to me, is the state that you're in. You're pretty much possessed by that spirit. You get rid of the possession of the spirit effectively, and then you're no longer in that state of being. What is actually required? There's a lot of people that will say, well, Jesus Christ, of course. To me, in my opinion, Jesus Christ has many different forms. I believe Jesus has many forms, and a lot of people are not ready to hear this, but I believe that Jesus is also Lucifer. That's for another video, though, okay? Mainly and primarily, I think that what you can take away from this would be love. And love does not always have to be sacrifice. A lot of people are obsessed with the ideology of sacrificing one for another, when in reality, what I believe that sacrifice is where ultimately it's where you may kind of be rid of a problematic person, you know, but that's another story. Like, I'm talking about a person that just causes too many problems, okay? And sacrifice doesn't necessarily mean ending that person's life, but it may end up being something like, that person going to prison for a little while or forever, or either a mental institution. At any rate, there is it, to talk about spirit possession would take forever, okay? For example, there is a spirit of sacrifice. That's a spirit that people can be possessed by. And you can always tell when people are possessed by the spirit of sacrifice because they have a preoccupation with death. They're always talking about how they would die or how they wouldn't mind dying. People that are possessed by sacrifice usually feel like they are in the afterlife, I know that for me, when I had a considerable amount of death magic that was put on me, which I definitely have a desire to live and to live a very long time. But during that time that I had all that going on, I just, for a brief moment, it just felt like I was already in the spirit realm, so that a lot of things are spirit, okay? You can become possessed by the spirit of joy, which it's nothing wrong with that spirit, but there are a lot of malignant spirits, and I think that they're predicated upon by people personally. Do I feel that there are actual spirits of poverty, spirits of homelessness? Not really. I think that there are a lot of people that conjure those spirits. It can be even a collective consciousness, okay? So, the point that I am making here as a high priestess is that I think that people need to realize that things don't have to end up the way Anneliese Michel ended up. Doesn't have to end up like that, you know. But I also think that there are a lot of people that have accepted annihilation and destruction, which I believe that comes from a place that I'm not even going to speak of. I feel like it would take too long for me to explain that. I feel like a lot of people in social media are under possession by the spirit of destruction, especially people that are always constantly trying to bring people down that are not studying them. Those people themselves are possessed by the spirit of destruction, and they are trying to possess others to be under the possession of destruction. So, anyway, rest in peace to Anneliese Michel. Exorcisms. That's what we do when we do a curse reversal. That's what we do when we do a money unblocker or we unblock your fertility. It's the same exact thing. We are exorcising you of a spirit that is either harming you or blocking you. So exorcisms don't even have to be scary like this. I just think that people have deviated so far away from what actually works, and they have no reason to. We are definitely currently right now in a satanic panic and we have been for quite some time. And I just think that it's rooted in a lot of ignorance. But being that we are constantly having the spirit of patriarchy, which is a spirit. Patriarchy is a spirit, a very negative, malignant spirit, might I add. It is, okay? And it's because it was made that way. It was created that way, okay? The matriarch, not so much, because that was created in love. The patriarchy was factually created out of the opposite. It's about control. It's about very rigid conforming, to an idea or an ideology that is not going to necessarily be suitable for a lot of people, because everybody's journey in life is different. So then the patriarchy ends up causing a lot of discrimination, a lot of suffering to people, when the universe is and has other things planned. So, for example, many of the programmings and things that were created out of patriarchy, for example, going to school, graduating from high school, going to college, those things that are not possible for some people, not feasible, or those things don't necessarily work out for anyone's advantage. And then we end up with things such as, now we want to say that the world is overpopulated because there's not enough when there's plenty. So, there's a lot of things that were created. To me, patriarchy is a system that was created falsely. This is a falsely created dynamic that it has nothing to do with nature. Okay? And whenever you bring up nature, people always want to talk about animals. No, we're not animals. We're human. We're mammals. You know what I mean? But it just goes to show that, people have deviated away from the nurturing. Looking at this photograph of Anneliese, she is severely malnourished. This is possibly even what a person would look like if they don't eat for 40 days. So, that's pretty much it. I'm going to wrap this thing up. You guys are welcome to contact me at divineservicesapothecary.com. A lot of people need exorcisms. We get exorcisms all the time whenever we are ridding ourselves of something negative. Going to the bathroom can be an exorcism, to be honest with you. It's all about how you look at it, okay? All right. Hopefully we don't have any more tragedies like this, but I'm sure that we will, because there's been many tragedies just like this since Anneliese Michel. All right. You guys have a great day. Blessings. Please subscribe, like, share. Bye.